Still ahead, 4 state lawmakers were on the front lines of the Harvey response efforts. They serve in the Texas State Guard, and one of them joins us next to discuss his role in the relief efforts and how his service informs his decisions as a policymaker. Welcome back to Capitol Tonight. 4 state lawmakers were on the front lines of the Harvey response efforts. They serve in the Texas State Guard, which was called up alongside the Texas National Guard. Representative Tony Dale of Cedar Park was one of them, and he joins us now. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
You're a major in the State Guard, and what was this like for you to be called up? When were you called up? How long were you stationed, and where exactly did you serve?
Well, it was interesting because the Saturday the storm was coming in was actually a normal drill weekend, but it was not normal in the sense that as soon as you got there, you realized that a very large storm was impacting Texas, and I went to a briefing at Camp Mabry, and we were told that there were going to be about 1,300 or 2,000 people called up in the National Guard, and then the next day I went to a briefing and they said this is looking more like 3,000, and then within a couple days it was all hands on deck, everybody's coming in including the State Guard. So it ramped up very quickly, which I think was a good call. I did some missions at Camp Mabry, logistics, getting people out the door, and also contacting all the lawmakers that were in the impacted zone. We called all the members of the House and Senate that were impacted, talked to many of them in person, reminding them how to follow their emergency procedures, to work through their county judges to get assistance, and ended up in Victoria helping pass out food and water and ice to people, which was interesting to see, but also very rewarding to be able to give that kind of assistance to people, and went to the big NRG shelter in Houston as well.
What were the accommodations like, and what were the spirits like of people being there so close to them after all of this tragedy struck?
I was really impressed by the people in Victoria because, they were coming through, and it didn't matter who you were. People were coming through in cars that were, looked like they needed some work, and you had people coming through in very expensive cars. It doesn't matter who you were, what demographic, but to talk to them, see if they need medical care, and ask them how they're doing. And their biggest thing they all said was, I'm doing fine. I know there's people that are hurt more than we are, and I just want electricity. That was the big thing. They wanted power back on.
What was the devastation like to see it firsthand?
Well, I contrast it because I got to go down to Victoria where there was a lot of wind damage. You could see the roofs were definitely destroyed in a lot of places, trees down all over the place. You could just tell going through that, it was a big wind event in Victoria. And then when you get over to Houston, even days and days and days after the storm, there was flooding up to the roof on many cars. There were cars on the side of the road just abandoned. In some areas where there was still water, halfway up windows on buildings.
You have a military background, but just your role with the State Guard and the others that were there, were you working alongside some of the other 3 lawmakers that were also called up for this?
Yeah, Phil King and Risco Kane and Cecil Bell and I serve in strategic initiatives, part of the headquarters, although Cecil Bell is an engineer by trade, and he's been going out helping get water treatment plants back up online. So it's an incredible mission where, your city is impacted and you can't provide water, but the person that probably does that job, their home's probably flooded out too, or they've got damage and they got to take care of that. So the State Guard can come in and supplement that kind of need in the city and get things back up and running. So that's what he's been doing, which is really wonderful work.
Yeah, good to see all of you guys out there helping out. As someone who did this mission, continues to do this mission, how does it, make you look at things from a policy standpoint? Being on the front lines, how does it change your mind as a policymaker? Well,
being privy to some of the briefings that happen on a daily basis, you can certainly see the scope of this. It was, without question, an unprecedented event for Texas. The cost of the state of Texas, aside from the personal losses that people have experienced and the insurance losses, but just the state agencies, it's over $500 million now. And that's something that we're going to have to address at some point down the road. But I can tell you that the Texas Department of Public Safety, the military forces, the Department of Emergency Management have performed admirably, along with other state agencies as well. This is almost every agency has some role in this, and they've been doing a fabulous job. I'm very, very impressed.
Where do you stand? There's been question over whether or not to tap the rainy day fund to help out with this, and whether you guys should be called back for a special session to decide to do that. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I think the governor's already talked about this and said he doesn't think that a special session is necessary. I think he's probably right, because we knew during the debate over the budget this last session that the Legislative Budget Board has the authority to move some money around. We also just started our new fiscal year, so the agencies have money to work with. Now, whether that's going to be sufficient all the way through, we'll have to see, but I think we've got some flexibility in our spending tools now. It would not surprise me if members of the legislature felt that this was an appropriate use for rainy day fund down the road. We gave money for Bastrop fires, which was a big event that impacted Bastrop County with rainy day funds, so there's a precedent for this.
Biggest changes you see moving forward from what you were able to experience firsthand with regards to what lawmakers need to address to better prepare for the next one? While we never want to see that in our lifetime, just things that lawmakers can do, steps that can be taken this next time around.
Well, I think we really have to go through our lessons learned from this, because while a lot of things happened well, I'm sure there's some things that we need to improve upon. And when you have a long time between major events like this, it's been a long time since Rita and Ike, there's lessons to be learned. One good example is we had a system we put in place after Katrina where we can track evacuees with a barcode and a bracelet, and we put that to great use during this. We never would have done that if we didn't have the problems in Katrina, for example. So there's going to be things that we learned this time. For example, people were flying drones right after the storm struck, and that was getting in the way of helicopters. Well, there were no drones that were readily available during Katrina, Ike, Rita. So these are the kind of things Jeff see as technology helping or hurting in some of these areas, and how do you address that as well?
A lot of questions and a lot of things will be addressed, I'm sure, this next session. And in the interim, Representative Dale, thank you for your work down there, and thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
The Quorum Report's Harvey Kronberg is in next.